West, y'all.
Kia ora, talofa lava, and welcome to the Counter Ruck, a podcast where we discuss all things rugby. I'm the host of the Counter Ruck, Stacey, so thanks for joining us for another episode. We are joined today by a Counter Ruck regular, so I'll introduce him very quickly. We've got from the City of the Future and a senior Wes Network columnist, Joey. Joey, mate, thanks for jumping on us.
Thank you, brother. Once again, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you on, mate. Before we get into it, I'll just check off some of our housekeeping. So check out our website, www.weswesnet.com, and don't forget to click the support us button on the page to keep the content flowing. And we also have some exclusive content available for our supporters, so definitely some additional benefits there. I'll also mention you can follow the Counteract on Twitter and Facebook, so give us a follow and give us a like on there. So we'll get into it, mate. I'll start with some feedback that we got from some of our listeners or our viewers, depending on how you consume the podcast. So our last episode, we spoke about the Auckland NPC selection and sort of the lack of players from the Rovers. We got a lot of feedback, particularly on TikTok, I believe. Now, I'm a bit older, Joey, so I'm not on TikTok at all, actually. So, but we did get a lot of comments on there. So I just having a look at some of the screenshots. So a person, May, she had the most liked comment on there, and she said, "For Auckland, it's not what you got, it's who you know," which sort of echoes what we've been saying, and it sums up the thoughts of, I guess, of many of the people who commented on that post there. We also got Stitched Up, which isn't something that I was familiar with, but someone, Let's 13 Honest, he created it as reply video. So I'm not sure what that's called on TikTok in the TikTok world, but the gist of his video was don't change franchises, I think was one of the things he said in reference to a lot of the Rovers players following the coach over from Ardmore Marist in the Counties region, and also that we don't know what we're talking about, which is probably more for me than it was for you there, Joey, mate. But what did you make of that, this video, and also what May had to say there?
Oh, I probably wouldn't be surprised if it was about me because I've been getting hit from all angles this week since that last episode, especially from folks who have some direct and indirect involvement with Auckland Rugby, the Auckland Rugby Union. So, sharing their thoughts and feedback with me and letting me know that I shouldn't be sharing my opinions the way I have been on the lay of the land there, and they'd love to catch up with me to set things straight. And a few of them I've offered a chance to come on the show, and none of them have taken me up on it yet. So we'll see as time goes on, but. Yeah, it's always a touchy subject when you're directly involved or indirectly involved with an organisation, and you see someone throwing stones, someone from the City of the Future throwing stones. I get it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, people need to realise that I talk from my own experience and from my own opinion, my own perspective. I'm not talking kaka. I'm not making things up. I'm actually just talking about facts of things as I see it. So if you have your opinions and you're strong about it, please feel free to make a comment and set us straight in the comments. We're always open to new perspectives, and nobody's wrong. Everyone's got their own perspective, which is right. So share and share away. It's always healthy to have these kind of back and forths and sharing. Let's call it sharing.
Yeah, I agree. It would be good because I know that you're a lot more connected in the rugby circles than I am. So you know a lot of people who have come through the system and have a more in-depth understanding than I do. So yeah, it would be good to get that feedback. I know that there might be reluctance to come on the show, but even off sort of out of it, and just to speak from their own perspectives and what they experience, because I know people in the past who probably could have made it but didn't, sort of guys. So it would be good
Yeah.
to sort of understand what they perceived as to what happened there, even if they are still involved with Auckland Rugby or not. Now, just on that video, there was like Joey said, we appreciate that feedback. But I think one thing on the TikTok was sort of like a 90-second snippet of a 45-minute podcast. So there was more additional stuff. So I know some of it got taken a
Mm.
bit out of context there, but I do think
Ah.
most of the feedback was sort of aligned to where me and you were going, where there seems that there are other issues at play with selection, which is good. But yeah, just for the people who responded, thanks for that feedback. We do want everyone to know that there is a more to it. There is a whole podcast there, so just so you can get a bit more context and get a bit more deeper into it. But yeah, we do appreciate all that feedback. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, one more commenter, Clyde Moore. Clyde Moore. He was mentioned on YouTube. He's actually quite a smart dude, this guy. So I might have to get him on the episode on a podcast here or something. But he mentioned this is what he had to say. Another cracker episode, gents. Segment this and chuck it up amongst the other commentary of the sport on Twitter. Nobody is telling our story re Auckland Club Rugby representative issues and politics. I can see it both ways. Auckland Rugby has invested in the players chosen. What would you all do? This is the same issue New Zealand Rugby has as well, a bottleneck at Super Rugby level. I'm with the bro. More needs to be put into club rugby. In my opinion, Super Rugby isn't needed. NPC should be our top tier. It has existing routes for players and more seats available for talent to develop and put young talent under pressure and for the late bloomers to show themselves. So yeah, excellent comment there. There's a bit to unpack on that. In regards to putting things up on Twitter, I'm not really big on Twitter either, but I'll get our editor in chief, Kim's, to have a look into that. But mate, Joey, what did you make of that comment? Particularly the part about like, Auckland, they've invested a lot in the players they've chosen to put through the system. So it can be hard for outsiders, like the Rovers players, for instance, to essentially get a chance because that means Auckland Rugby will be, minimising that investment in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's always been the way, especially in my experience, from when I was a kid. As soon as you had guys around you making Auckland rep teams, they seemed to stay in the system as long as they stayed fit and healthy and played at the right schools or at the right clubs. And Auckland tends to look after those folks that they invest in from those young ages and develop, because they're taking them through these academies, they're taking them through these sports programs. And I know Auckland, I don't know if they still got it, but there was a program called Pro Sport at Auckland, which was quite a successful program, because a lot of the folks that came out of that program, boys and girls, they would go on to play for some cool clubs in sevens as well. So Auckland does have some great developmental programs in place already, and they do invest in the local talent from the young ages, and they nurture them and nurture them and nurture them, and then when it's time, the idea is that those academy folks, or those folks that they've nurtured and developed, then um, naturally want to play for the rugby union, which a lot of them do. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Some go offshore and take the contracts that come up or the opportunities that come up, and some move unions. It's just the reality of it. You can't. It's kind of similar to business, where a CEO may, or a CFO may question a CEO as to why they decided to train somebody up only for them to leave to go to
Right.
another company. And the response is always, well, what if we didn't train them and they stayed? Right? That's more detrimental to the organization. So if they didn't develop these youngsters and nurture them whilst they're talented, and really hone in on those skill levels, what happens to the union on a whole? It becomes weaker. So Auckland have got, they're on the right track. I think anyone who's taken my last episode comments to heart watch the whole episode. I don't talk full shit about Auckland Rugby. I'm an Auckland man myself, and I came up through Auckland rep footy as well, so I've got a lot to owe Auckland Rugby for. And although it does seem like I'm talking shit about Auckland Rugby, I'm very passionate about the development and the opportunities to be afforded in the right places at the right times. And I just feel like there needs to be an overhaul on processes like, you know, Gallagher Shield, for instance. You have these blokes who play for these clubs who put in so much blood, sweat, and tears into the season, only to get to the end of the season and have nothing to show for their success. Winning the Shield, sure, it's a great feat. It's a great milestone. It's a great feat. Um, and take nothing away from the fact that you're a champion. But at the same time, if you're not recognized as an individual amongst your peers, what is there to look forward to outside of Gallagher Shield? Do you just play Gallagher Shield rugby all your career, or do you aspire for other things like rep footy? And if rep footy is afforded to people around you or people who haven't been present in the club season, then obviously questions are going to arise. So yeah, so it's one of those things. Everyone will come at it from different angles. It's kind of like you know, it's kind of like a glass, right? You hold a glass up, and from wherever you're standing in the room, you will look at that glass from that perspective. You won't see it from my perspective because I'm looking at it from where I'm sitting, and you're looking at it from where you're sitting, right? So we all have a different perspective, but it's the same glass. So, you know, I think people just need to be wary that opinions are there and perspectives are there, and people will have their own opinions. They'll have their own perspectives, which we respect. At the same time, try not to be that person who wants to change the opinion of someone just because it doesn't align with your own. Just be a bit more empathetic, see the world through their eyes, and understand it and respect it. That's it. You can have your own opinion that differs, or you can disagree with somebody's thoughts. I have people disagree with me all the time every time I make a comment about rugby. That's fine. I'm not going to get all feels about it. I'm not going to come at you and troll you online unless you try and mock me. Then it's game on, right? It's like it's like I'm all for banter, but if you get it all up in your feels because of a comment I've made, let me know. Let me know, and I'll share with you why I've said it. But let's be adult about this, right? Because as long as I've been a guest on this podcast, I've had people question me. They go, "Oh yeah, we really love your guys' podcast. Hey, that thing you said the other day about this or about that. What did you mean?" See, that kind of stuff, I respect that. Question me on it, get my perspective on it, and I'll get yours. Done. But don't try and go out there and change everybody's mind about the way they feel about certain subjects and topics. It's like, if you throw stones at every dog that barks at you, you'll never get to your destination. Right? So yeah, let's collaborate, let's all move on, but at the same time let's call things out for what they are. And that's what I do. I call things out for the way I see it. And if I see Auckland Rugby, my beloved union, Auckland Rugby, is not pulling their weight, or is not being transparent in certain processes and systems, I'm going to call it out. That's it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I agree with that. I will say most of the people, the comments were sort of similar to what we thought. It was more like a head scratcher that the Rovers won. They won last year sort of out of nowhere, and you could think, well, hold on a second, maybe that was a fluke. And they win it again, and you think, well, hold on a minute, they've been the best team 2 times in a row. that must lead to hopefully higher honours for some players and it getting overlooked. So I think more was asking the question,
Yeah,
and we're getting that
yeah,
feedback as to a lot of feedback, and a lot of people sounds like they were also wondering why are these guys getting picked, which is fine, So it's just good to put it out there. So you
yeah.
appreciate everyone's feedback, like you said, Joey. And I will say, Clyde Moore, that's twice in a row. He's really made me think twice about some alternative ideas and his thoughts. I thought, so Clive Moore, if you're listening, mate, I really like the way you think. He's quite a deep thinker of the game. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we can try and get him on in a future episode. With his comments there, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get into it, mate. Probably a bit late. We missed last week's episode, but the World Cup squad for the All Blacks got announced, along with a few other World Cup squads. So now the World Cup's starting to get real. I think it's less than 4 weeks away. And yeah, we just got our first taste of that with the World Squad, with the squad announcements. So we won't go through all of them. We might go through a couple of highlights, but I wanted to look at the All Blacks first. So they named their 33-man squad, and I think just for our listeners, I think it's on our Facebook page. I will double check that. But mate, Joey, just get your initial thoughts. What did you make of the squad, and any surprises or issues for you with that?
A good mix of young and old. I just thought the right players were chosen on form, but
Mm.
also some key players were chosen, I feel, as game breakers. And they really deserve to be there because they put their hands up. And the two guys I'm going to name, probably controversial for us folks up here in the North Island, but Whainganuku is one, right? And Frizzell is the other. And
Okay.
the reason why I say these are controversial because they're both leaving, right?
Ah,
At the
okay,
end
I'm with
at
you.
the end of the World Cup, they're both leaving, so their time in the black jersey is limited. It's numbered. Their days are numbered, and obviously the coaching staff know this, but they still chose them. So there must be a good reason why they've chosen them. And I believe the reason why they've chosen them is they've really put their hands up and they really have shown, mate, pick me for the World Cup and I will do the damage. And it looks like they will, both those two players. So um, those are the key ones in terms of one forward and one back. I'm a big fan of the front row that they've chosen. They've gone for, you know, they've gone for a bit of experience in Nepololala. They've gone for youth. I'm a massive fan of Taukeaho. At the expense of another guy who I'm a fan of, Asafo Aumua. Um, yeah, I think the props and the hookers are looking good. Um, in terms of locking pairs, I really want Brody and Sam to have a great World Cup. This may be their last one together. Um, yeah, I think Sam should go out on a high if they can, go as hard as possible. I'm not sure whether that first game against France is going to be a W for the All Blacks. I mean, if we're going to drop one, I hope it's that one, and then we win all the rest like South Africa did, um, and take it all the way. But yeah, if we are going to drop one, I hope it's that one and not on the business end of the World Cup.
Yep, yeah, I agree with that. And just saying that, if they do lose that World game, I think that will be the first time ever the All Blacks have lost a pool match. And
Oh, is
that's,
that right?
I'm pretty sure, I can't recall them ever lose. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've won all their pool games or every World Cup. So
Mm.
it'll be another, the Foster haters, and people will probably put me in that category. We'll just use that as more ammo to be like, I think this guy's no good. But yeah, just on those two guys you mentioned, Fainganuku and Frizzell, this is the first time that the All Blacks coach has effectively been told he's no longer required after the World Cup. So normally,
Mm.
when they're picking their squads, they still think that they might be part of it. They haven't made that decision until after the World Cup. So if you still think you're going to be part of it, there's still that continuation. We want to keep building for next year because you might still have to be the coach next year. But with
No.
Foster, he knows he's out. So he's just who's going to win it for me now. and that's where those guys are good now. And then next year, well, that's Foster's, Robertson's problem. So yeah,
Yeah.
good thoughts there on that squad. The guy I thought was quite lucky was actually Caleb Clark. I thought he was lucky to be there. Now, I rate him highly as a player, but I was a bit more worried about the mix. So Bodie's been playing 15, so if you include him as an outside back, they've picked 6 outside backs all up. They've only picked four locks, and Retallick's carrying that injury, and they've got 5 loosies as well in a position which has got quite a high attrition rate. So I probably would have sacrificed an outside back for either another Lucy in Sami Penny Final, for instance, or more lock cover for Brady Retallick's injuries. So maybe someone like Josh Lord. And Caleb Clark, for me, he's probably been the most underwhelming of the backs, outside backs so far. So he would be the unlucky one to miss out. Also, he's a specialist left wing. And to me, he's not the starting left wing. Mark Tiller is the starting left wing. So can you just carry a guy who can only effectively play one position? I'm not sure about that. So he was the one who I thought was quite lucky. Like even though I'm a diehard Auckland fan and a Blues fan, yeah, and
Yeah, for sure.
Finau was one who I thought was quite unlucky. He played really good. We talked about this sort of off air. He played really good in that one test that he got, and you're thinking if that's sort of a trial for him, I thought he passed, but obviously not. Hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree. Look, I think probably 90 to 95% of that squad were right on with the selection in terms of Aussie selections. The unlucky ones had to be some Benny Finau, and the lucky ones, like you say, Caleb Clark, I thought was lucky. I'm a fan of his as well. But Christie was another one I thought was lucky.
Oh, that's
Right.
heart wrenching
I'm
for
a
us Blues guys.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan as a Blues fan as well. I want Christie in there, but I thought he was lucky. I thought he was lucky. But I think the All Blacks have the luxury of having these guys on call. Brad Weber, Finau, Joe Moody, Stevenson. They're in the standby squad. Or the wider standby on call. They're probably training with the team or the squad. And if there's any injuries, I'm sure they'll bring them in. So they're only an injury away from realizing World Cup berths.
Yeah, they're right, and we saw that 2015, the kick which Roger always talks about. What's his name? What Stephen Donald was out white baiting and he's called upon,
Yeah.
so you never know.
He loves bringing that up, doesn't he, old Roger?
He does. So you pick your 33-man squad, but it could be 34, 35, 36 to actually get it done. So, and we have seen that. So you're right for those guys on standby. Just because you didn't get initially selected, they should still be training hard, and you never know, you might get your opportunity, just like Stephen Donald. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One more comment I would make on the that particular squad is that it is time for Captain Sam Cane to really step up. He needs to make his mark on this World Cup as a skipper.
mm,
He's been plagued by injury and he hasn't really produced the kind of form that got him into the All Blacks in the first place. The past few All Blacks captains have basically carried our national side
mm,
on their shoulders, and it's like through guts and determination and strong will and not wanting to let the team down or the fans down or the entire country down, like Adi Savia, for instance, case in point, right? So Sam Cane really needs to step up in this World Cup because that's going to be his legacy, I believe. I'm not sure what it's going to look like for him in terms of how many days he has left in the jersey, or how many seasons he has left in the black jersey. But I'm thinking this World Cup, he really needs to step up. Otherwise, he could be looking at, you know, being put out to pasture.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm just pulling it up now. He's only 31, which isn't old by modern rugby standards, but you're right. The toll that the way he plays is taking on his body. He looks like he's nearly 40 out there. But we'll carry on that Sam Cane discussion because one thing which did pop up in the news recently was an article from the northern hemisphere, from Stuart Barnes, basically lambasting the captain, Sam Cane. So the gist of his article was, he's not good enough. He's not McCaw, which he mentioned, which I don't know who is, and he thinks Papali'i should be starting and so forth. So not sure if you saw that, but any thoughts on that with Kane? And also we talked about the captaincy. Do you think he's the right guy to be the captain, and should he be starting for the All Blacks?
Oh, that's a tough one because you've got a guy like Adi Savea, and Adi can assume the position of captain. But I'm just wondering if in a World Cup tournament, whether that's going to take away from Adi's natural game, right? And are we going to rely on Adi to play his natural game, to be that game breaker, to be that leader within the team that the others can aspire to or be inspired by? Um, so I wonder if Sam Cane, you know, will also be inspired by the fact that he's got Adi alongside him, or he's got Adi ready to come on. So that's not a bad thought to have in the back of your mind when you're under all that pressure. At the same time, I just wonder if Sam, his injuries take away or distract him from you know the job at hand, and he needs to really perform. He needs to step it up. He needs to bring his A game. He needs to put it all on the line and empty the tank throughout this tournament because it could be his last in the black jersey.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing also with Adi, because I wouldn't mind Adi as well, is that there's no question about whether he's the best in in this position or if his position's up for grabs or anything like that. No, it's obvious he's one of the first names that you write down, and that's where McCaw and that analogy comes true because McCaw was always a guarantee as well, and you got to
Hmm.
command your position first, and then you can be the All Black captain. And that's sort of like a good way of looking at it. So I remember I hate using this analogy now, but I used to bring it up before with the Ruben Thorne scenario, where Ruben Thorne's position, he wasn't always the best sixth, but because he was the captain, he kept getting picked. Now, I don't like using that for Sam Cane because I think Sam Cane's a bit better than that. And Rog, who's a regular on this podcast, he's probably falling out of his chair listening, going to hear what I'm about to say. But
Hmm.
but I've actually come around to Sam Cane, particularly with the form of Frizzell, who you mentioned earlier there, Joey. His athleticism that allows Cane to play a bit more tighter and sort of disrupt opposition ball and tackle the shit out of anyone who moves and, do that sort of dirty work, which he's really good at. And I
Mm.
think Jason Ryan, who I always give a lot of credit to, he's really transformed the All Black forwards and he's brought that physicality back. And Kane, he's a big part of that as well. So I was clamouring for Papali'i right up until the start of the year, really. But I think Jason Ryan can get the best out of Kane for the All Blacks more than say what that previous assistant coach Tom Coventry was doing before. So yeah, I'm coming around to Sam Kane. And Rog, he's not here to gloat to tell me that he was right all along, which is probably a good thing. But Rog, I think you had a point on Sam Kane. I know he's a big fan. So yeah,
Mm.
yeah, will be interesting. We'll carry on the World Cup theme though, a little bit there because I know you wanted to talk about some of these other nations, so we won't go through them more, but just some of the highlights from the other squads I'm having a look out there. So there were some big selections in some of the other squads. So looking at South Africa, they're without their talisman, one of my favourite players, non-New Zealand players, Hodre Pollard. He's out.
Yeah.
Lucanio who's their world-class centre, he's out. Australia, who you quite took a liking to, just looking at their team, they've left out Michael Hooper and Quaid, and they've gone for a young team. France, they've lost their gun first five. Intermac, I can't remember his name, but it's Emil Intermac's son. And Sexton from Ireland, he's suspended for the early part. Owen Farrell looks like he's going to join him on the sidelines for a bit. The England first five, mate. So what have you made all these other teams in there? Looks like they're struggling to get some fitness issues. And just from the All Blacks perspective, as well, does that give you a bit more confidence about their chances?
Yeah. Look, I think these teams, the selections that they make, I don't know if they have, New Zealand's squad in mind, and when they're making these selections, and I don't know whether they're making their selections before or after the All Blacks are being named. But I'm sure they're trying to pick the best possible teams that they have available to them. Handré Pollard, I'm a massive fan of that guy. I remember meeting him um,
Oh,
in Auckland when they had a under 20s comp, and it was in Auckland, and this was 2015 or 16. Um, yeah, and they were just youngsters then, and then within the space of 18 months or 2 years, they were playing for the national team. These youngsters who, and I remember meeting them and thinking, Father, you guys are big boys, and you're only 20, 21. So, um, yeah, I think a lot of when I look at the draws um, that have been chosen for this World Cup, there's no real for me. There's no real pool of death as you always have every World Cup. I think it's all evenly matched to some degree. Maybe just the Ireland pool that
yeah,
Ireland's in is probably the hardest one if you
yep.
were to pick anyone.
I'm just looking at that now. I think you're right. I'm trying to find that pool. Yeah, yeah, that's the pool of death.
I think with regard to the likes of the Wallabies, if they come up against Argentina and Argentina can play a good big game, um, and put their minds to it, they could possibly topple the Australians. But at the same time, could be anyone's game in between those two nations. Um, New Zealand France will be a bit of a nail biter because I know France, they're touted probably as the favourites of the tournament, being given the form that they've had in the last couple of years, especially even with the premiership, the super level or premiership level as they have over there. They've done really well in developing their teams, and they've got some awesome Kiwi talent spread across the nation over there within the various professional teams that they have, professional clubs. Um, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one, especially for I think the traditionally strong four, which is Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and England. Those four teams. It's going to be a tough one, but at the same time, I wonder if the paths will lead, say, a New Zealand or a France to meet for me, obviously I'm biased because I made a bet about this, Australia in the final. And the Australia card, I think, it's an interesting one because nobody knows how well this Australian team can do because nobody's really seen what those youngsters can produce. They're only going off the hunch that Eddie Jones has, but he's no slouch when it comes to coaching and being strategic. He's the same guy that took down South Africa with the Japanese team, right, with Japan. So if he could do that, which in my eyes, is the biggest international upset in international rugby, bar maybe Tonga beating Australia in '73 or Samoa beating Australia, I think that's the biggest upset in terms of World Cup, you know, um, and maybe Tonga beating France is up there as well. But I reckon Eddie has got some tricks up his sleeve that he will use at this World Cup, and I think you know it's a risk to underestimate Eddie because he is such a brilliant rugby mind, and he may have what it takes to get these guys, these youngsters, to produce the goods and get those results that are needed to get them to the final stages. And it's those final stages where it's do or die, right? And I don't know whether they'll have the depth in terms of experience or leadership to take them all the way, but we'll see. We'll see. He knows it's a huge risk, it probably needs to be done, especially if you've got 2027 in mind, World Cup 2027. Like he says, he reckons they could win both cups. But I personally think he has an eye on 2027 as being the one that they're targeting right now, and throwing everything at this one this year. So that's my take on the Wallabies. And you've got these other, I call them also rans, that are just filling up, the pools, as you do with every World Cup. But that gap is closing, right? That's closing from the '91 World Cups, the '95 World Cups, where you had these ridiculous score lines. It's actually a surprise looking back that people wanted to watch those games, but that was kind of still transitioning from the amateur era, right? When you're talking about the '99 World Cup, that transition between '95 and '99, um, you know, that kind of was telling in terms of, oh, far out, these massive scores are dwindling. They're not, they're not 106-0 or whatever it was that New Zealand got against Japan once. So yeah, I think you won't see those general normal rugby scorelines anymore. The gaps are closing. The nations are getting stronger. They're getting more and more developed, and they're getting more and more help by the tier one nations in terms of rugby development, in terms of coaching and management and things like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting World Cup. It's going to be an exciting World Cup. I think it's a bit more of a level playing field. I think in terms of personnel, in terms of, like, right now, I couldn't think of standouts. I couldn't think of who's going to really make their mark on this World Cup as a standout the way Jonah did. I mean, there can only ever be one Jonah, but when you think about World Cups, you want to think about, okay, who's going to be the star of this World Cup? Is there going to be anyone? That'll be a good one to try and predict.
Yeah, we
Who would
might
be
add that
the
to
player of
our
the
next
tournament?
list. No, I think next podcast will be a couple of weeks before the World Cup, so we might do that, add that to our list for the next
Yeah.
one. Yeah, quite like that. But yeah, good thoughts there, Joey. We do have some listeners out from Australia and all the rest of it, so they'll be happy with what you've had to say about them. I was a bit 50-50 about that call to get rid of Hooper and
Mm,
Cooper and all the experienced guys. But when you look at where Australia's been the last sort of in this World Cup cycle, those experienced guys haven't got it done. So he's probably thinking, I can't just keep picking these players. Harsh on Hooper because he's been one of their better players, but you can't just keep picking those same guys who aren't getting the job. You need to make some changes. So I guess he's pulled the trigger now and said, well, now we're going to make some changes and roll the dice and see what happens. But the Eddie Jones factor is still a factor. But just as from an All Blacks fan's perspective, when you see the other contenders, like South Africa's lost some guns, Australia's gone young, and Owen Farrell's possibly out for long term, and Intermac, who we mentioned, all the other people that I put in that same category with the All Blacks, they've all lost someone good. And we, touch wood, haven't had that. So that gives me a bit more confidence. Also, when you factor in the way the All Blacks have played sort of this year and
mm,
that turnaround, I'm a bit more confident than I was, say, 12 months ago. So that's always good as an
mm.
All Blacks fan. But I quite like, I was going to say Ireland. I liked Ireland, but looking at that pool, South Africa, Ireland, and Scotland, that's three top five teams in the world on that same side. You've got Tonga. You think Tonga's got, Charles Piutau and Israel Folau now with the new eligibility rules, George Moala and all these types of players. So they'll be fielding one of their strongest teams that they've had for a while. So Ireland, I'm thinking, could win it, or they might not get out of that pool, depending on given their record.
Mm.
But what it does do is makes for possibly the most competitive World Cup we've ever had. Like you said,
Yeah.
there's no 100-0 beatings anymore. I'd be surprised if there was. So the worst teams have gotten better, and that's thanks to the IRB or whatever they're called now, World Rugby. making those eligibility rules a bit more friendlier for the tier two
Mm,
nations, and just the top. There's like 5 or 6 teams all quite even at the top as well. So it's gonna be a good World Cup. I've got a good feeling about it, and I need to get me some more gears, eh? Uh, my gears from my last World Cup, I have to add another X to the size since they're no, for 4 years since then. So yeah, get me some more gears. It's going to be good. But we'll start to look at. I want to have a quick look at the secondary schools rugby, but particularly up here in Auckland. So that's in full swing, and it looks like Sacred Heart is up against St Kitts in that final. But I understand there might have been a bit of controversy in the semis. Mate, Joey, did
yeah,
you want to touch on that? I know you know a bit more than I do about it.
yeah. So my old stomping ground, my old school,
Yeah.
De La Salle College, played against St Kitts on the weekend in the semi-final, one of the semi-finals, and lost based on a technicality. You know, the full-time score was 22 all after La Salle was leading for most of that second half.
Mm.
Um, you know, they had to go back on the technicality that whoever scored the first try in the game goes on to play in the final. So,
Wow.
unfortunately for La Salle, they didn't get to go through, and St. Kitts did. But that's just the way it is, right? So, I guess it's a harsh lesson, if anything, for the La Sallians and all those involved. That you don't put yourself in that kind of position in the first place if you want to make it to a final. You've got to really cement your place in the final by winning the game, by you know leading on the scoreboard when the final whistle is blown, and leaving it to chance by getting a draw. It's not everyone's preference to go on the technicality, and I'm sure it wasn't the preference of St. Kitts, although they probably weren't thinking about that as they were celebrating. Um, it's always hard for one of the two teams who are involved in that kind of a match. And unfortunately for this, for La Sallian community, it was La Salle. Um, a similar incident happened in 1997, where Otahu College played against Mount Albert Grammar at Sturgis Park in the outer fields, and they went to extra time, and it was, I don't know, 16 or something like that. And in extra time, I think it was Golden Point. I'm not sure, but Oreniai slotted a huge drop goal to win the game. So, or was it a penalty? If anyone's listening to that one, or anyone, please correct us on that one, on what actually happened, because that's my memory, and that's going back like 25, 6 years. But yeah, it's just one of those things, and nobody wants to lose on the technicality. There's been, and that's one of the many parts of Auckland rugby that I continue to question. Is it still relevant to do it that way for school kids? They train hard all year, they sacrifice hard all year round, only for a technicality to be the roadblock between them and a finals berth, grand final berth. So um, hats off to the La Salle boys, and also hats off to St. Kitts for toughing it out and making it to a draw, and actually getting themselves to the final. So the final is going to be played between Sacred Heart and St. Kitts. Battle of Waiōtaiki Bay, or Battle of Panmure Bridge, or Battle of Pakuranga Road, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Battle of the East, Battle of East Auckland. So yeah, unfortunate for La Salle, but at the same time, well done. Congratulations for getting that far, and there was huge support by the judge, judging by all the videos that I saw online and that were shared with me. Huge support by the La Salle community, and also St. Kitts. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I like watching schools rugby. It's really. free flowing, and it's not overcoached, and there's a lot of good skills. People chancing their arm a bit more as well. You see, so as opposed to playing a lot of structure and all the rest of it. So yeah, good luck to the two teams involved there. And I'm with you. They need to find a better way of sorting it out. Um, we know people who, this for some people, this is the highest level of rugby that they'll get to. There's a massive falling away after school rugby and going on to club rugby. So
Mm.
you'd hate that if you were, I'll say seventh form. I don't know what the proper word is now. That's how old I am. And that's your final year, and you're like,
Year
whoa,
13.
year 13, right? That sort of leaves a sour taste if you haven't got a chance to come back and redeem yourself for your school pride and all the rest of it. So hopefully they can sort that out better going forward, at least. Yeah. All right, Joey, mate. We're just about to finish up, mate. But before we do, we've got our $10 multi for our TAB account. So I didn't even get to do our bet last time because the team naming it came out too late, and I forgot to do the bet. So my bet was Aaron Smith. That was my prediction. Aaron Smith to score a try in his last home test. And sort of lucky we didn't get to do that bet because that didn't actually happen. But yeah, just for our listeners, what we try to do is get a few predictions, and we do a $10 bet each podcast based on those predictions. So, Joey, mate, have you got your eye on anything? I'll give you a quick rundown of some of the games first, just so you can have a think about it. The NPC is in full swing. I'm just pulling up the matches now. So we've got Hawke's Bay, Taranaki tomorrow, Counties Bay of Plenty, Harbour Auckland, which would be a good one, Wellington, Southland, Canterbury, Manawatu, and Northland, Tasman, and Hawke's Bay, Otago, Waikato, Taranaki on Sunday. So I'll give you my prediction for our count first, just to give you a bit of time to think things through. So Hawke's Bay, they've got a tough part of the draw. So they're playing Waikato on Wednesday, and then a short turnaround to play Otago again on Sunday. So that's quite a tall order for them, but they're 2 from 2 for a reason. So I'm going to pick them to do a double and win both games. Win on Wednesday and then win again on Sunday. So
Mm.
anything that you quite like in anything amongst that, all of that? I don't think
Yeah,
there's
I
any
agree with that.
international games at the moment.
I agree with that. And I think Hawke's Bay, above all other teams in the NPC this season, are more inspired to get some results because, what's happened in their region
Mm,
with the flooding,
that's
the
right.
advent of the flooding. So they'll want to give their community something to smile about, right? So, yeah, I would say, that's some smart money to put on Hawke's Bay to do well. So no, I agree with that one. Counties versus Bay of Plenty, I think you said was one of the games.
Yep.
Well, that's a tough one because I saw how Bay of Plenty played in the first game, or in the game against Waikato Mulu,
Mm.
and I really thought they were exciting. So I'm going to have to side with Bay of Plenty for that one, just because I haven't seen Counties play yet, and I will be seeing them play on the 27th of this month against Mulu over here at FMG Stadium.
Oh, nice.
Um, so yeah, it will be nice to see that game. Um, who was it this weekend? Who's Taranaki got?
Let me see. Hawke's Bay is playing Taranaki tomorrow.
So Hawke's
Um,
Bay, Taranaki. Yeah,
yeah.
Hawke's Bay, different. Yeah, I'd go with Hawke's Bay for that one, just because I haven't seen Taranaki
What about,
or
wait, got
heard that they've
any
done
thoughts
well.
on the Battle of the Bridge, Harbour Auckland, North Harbour and Auckland?
Oh, that's a tough one. But look, the my home bias is always going to come into play there, and I haven't heard any good things about North Harbour yet. So you know, um, Auckland would be my pick for that one.
Yep. Right, looks like we've got our bits for our multi. Nice, brother. I think that's us. So we're just about to wrap up now. Have you got any final thoughts just in closing our podcast, brother?
Yeah, it's exciting to see all the World Cup squads being named, and there's been some question marks over a few of those squads. I like the Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa squads that have been named. I think they're really exciting, and one of the three will make us extra proud to be Pacific Islanders when they go through, because not all three can go through. Unfortunately, it's never the way it's set up. The World Cup seems to be set up in a way that doesn't allow tier two nations all to come up together and meet in the quarterfinals. But look, I wish them all well, especially Samoa for obvious reasons. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, those squads are quite exciting. It's quite exciting to see some old heads and some youngsters get a chance to do their nations proud.
Mm. Yeah, nice. I think that's where we're both in that same spot where just the anticipation for that World Cup. So that excitement starts slowly building. We're seeing more and more teams finalising their squads. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I'm looking forward to what this should be the closest World Cup ever. So I also want to thank everyone for their comments as well. Most of them have been overwhelmingly supportive and positive. So and informative, I'll say that as well. So in terms of providing there's some different thoughts and different perspectives. So please, you keep those coming. One thing I did want to add about the Auckland Rugby discussion and selections, which have been a hot topic of late. I'm a bit old school, eh? So I grew up
Mhm.
watching the great Auckland teams of the late '80s and the early '90s, and they were just killing everyone. Then the game went pro. What '96 Super Rugby started, and we still had some leftover gun players from the amateur era who were transitioning to the professional era. So Auckland was still strong, but just looking at where we are now, the last time the Blues won a legitimate full competition, not a half pie one like tens and stuff, was way back in 2003. So that's 20 years ago. And
Far out,
yeah, and Auckland has only won the NPC once in the last 15 years. So
far out.
yeah, that's a dramatic fall from the halcyon days, from effectively a bygone era. And now there's a whole multitude of reasons as to why Auckland Rugby has fallen. When I look at the outstanding 1A schools comp we have and some of the gun players at club level running around that are overlooked, like the Rovers, for instance, and one of the reasons I think that we are falling is around the politics governing Auckland team selection. So that was
Mm.
sort of what we mentioned before, and I hope that they can get sorted sooner rather than later, just for a perspective of a rusted on Auckland fan. So yeah. All right. The Counter Ruck is available through the usual podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and many more. You can also follow. I watched it on video format on YouTube, and also snippets on TikTok that I was unaware of until now. So keep listening or watching, and don't forget to click subscribe. Joey, mate, thanks for being a part of the pod and sharing your rugby knowledge. We'll do it again soon. Cheers, boys.
Cheers.